Well, this is Power, the bell. Croeso nôl pawb, welcome back everybody. We have session 3 now when we will be taking Agendum 9 and Agendum 10. But before we begin, I'd like to invite Simon to give an announcement.
It's simply to say that the Secretariat have now consulted their diaries and we've learnt the difference between 2024 and 2025. And subject to scrutiny from the Archdeacon of St David's, we think the dates on the screen are now right, and the days to go with the dates are also right. So with the governing body's permission, those are the dates of the future meetings which you approved this morning. And apologies for the inaccuracy in the paperwork.
How very gratifying. Thank you very much indeed. Diolch yn fawr iawn. So we turn now to Hawl a Holly question time. A reminder that you have the questions. They have been circulated already. I gather that this is the largest number of questions, certainly that John Richfield can ever remember. And that's a very long time indeed. That's more than 30 years. So it may be the most ever questions that governing body has ever had. I think it may be a sign that democracy is breaking out. Seriously, though, to remind you that the procedures for questions is set out in the agenda booklet on what would be page 5, the pages that come immediately after the agenda itself. Rules for question time at point 2. The questions which you have will not be read out again. The answer will be given, and then the questioner may make a brief comment after hearing the answer, or ask a supplementary question only. So, and can I ask those, if you have got a question, if you'd like to sort of make your way to the front as the previous question is being dealt with, and just to note that the first 2 questions from Mrs. Carrie White and Sir Martin Donnelly will be taken, the response will be given to both of them together, since they are so closely linked. So could I invite, please, the Bishop of St Asaph to respond to questions 1 and 2.
There you are. I think this is must be a first of a governing body as well. Last speaker before lunch, first speaker after lunch. Just before I give the answer to the question, may I, on behalf of all the bench of bishops, say a warm thank you for the anonymous gifts that we're now receiving regularly at our governing body. A little package of goodies appeared earlier today, and the quality of the gifts was much admired. The generosity of the gifts and the affirmation they offered were very well received, which I suppose is another way of saying, keep them coming.
Bribery and corruption.
I am grateful to Sir Martin Donnelly and Mrs. Carrie White for raising the questions. Given that their inquiries cover very similar ground, I intend to offer one answer to both questions, although I suppose they both get the chance to make a supplementary comment or question. As Sir Martin and Mrs. White note, the canon providing for same-sex blessings following a civil ceremony of marriage or partnership, which was passed in September 2021, stipulated a 5-year experimental use of the right, a period which will expire on the 30th of September 2026. When the then Bench of Bishops introduced the legislation to governing body in 2021, they made it clear that they believed that this was only a transitional measure and that a review of the marriage rights of the Church in Wales would have to follow. And in his enthronement sermon of the 30th of April 2022, the Archbishop made it clear that it was one of his objectives to ensure the introduction of equal marriage within the 5-year period. As yet, the current bench has not undertaken any formal review of the canon, nor discussed next steps. And these questions are a useful prompt that we shall soon have to do so. It's, however, not unusual for canons of this nature where the 3-year mark is probably a good point at which to assess progress and begin preparations for what will happen next. Neither the canon nor the bishops have required any gathering of formal statistical information. However, having consulted with my colleagues, I'm able to report that it is our understanding that a small but steady stream of same-sex couples have availed themselves of the right, and we know of about 24 such ceremonies in the last 2.5 years. Although as no formal reporting is required, there may well be many more. And as I was saying in a conversation over lunch today, someone pointed out to me that it may well be that same-sex couples are waiting for an appropriate point, an appropriate anniversary in their partnership to seek a blessing. What we can report is that those couples of which we know have given very positive accounts of the blessing and of the liturgy, of its significance for their marriages or partnerships, and the warmth of support that has been given to them from family, friends, clergy, and congregations. I was particularly heartwarmed at one of these blessings I did myself to see the extent of genuine welcome and support from the members of the congregation for their priest and his partner. It's also true that several same-sex couples have reported that it is their hope and intention to wait until a church marriage service becomes available to them before they wish to seek a church blessing or ceremony. Since September 2021, there have been 3 new members of the bench, and tonight, hopefully, a new assistant bishop who attends bench as a guest. This newly constituted bench will have to agree what approach they wish to adopt as the 5-year experimental period progresses. I'm sure that we will address this work with the bench's customary vigour and reflection, and we will report through the normal channels. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bishop Gregory. So, Mrs. Carrie White, and a reminder, please, to everyone, either a comment or a supplementary question. Thank you.
So, Mrs. Carrie White from Bangor Diocese, I wish to thank Your Grace for the full response to my query. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Sir Martin.
Thank you, Martin Donnelly from Swansea and Brecon. If I could also very much thank the bishops for that response, and perhaps just ask as a supplementary, if, as the bench of bishops and the wider leadership consider these issues and the next stages, would it be helpful to come back to Synod perhaps next year with some questions or themes that we can all reflect on and consider together to help us learn, develop and grow, as the Archbishop said this morning, and have a wider debate before we come to more specific decisions on an additional change or whatever we want to do as the next step of welcoming same-sex couples into our church. Thank you.
Thank you, Sir Martin. Just taking a quick straw poll around my colleagues. We find it useful to sit at one table, not because we regard ourselves as a group apart, but because sometimes we do need to consult in this way in the course of governing body. But there is a favourable response to that idea that we have an early discussion at governing body as we discern the way ahead and not just return with legislation. One of the interesting things about the rite is when the Liturgical Commission were looking at the rite, there were two versions presented for us. One in what you might say is more traditional language, and the other in inclusive language. And at that stage, the bishops chose the more traditional because we felt that the rite had to fit in with all the other rites of the Church in Wales. But I think there is a question about how radical the Church in Wales wishes to be in future about degendering the liturgical language that we have. And a discussion where that could be opened out, I think, could be very well worthwhile indeed. Thank you.
Thank you. We move now to question 3, which has been asked by Mrs. Sue Rivers and Mrs. Angela Traherne, although I gather only one will respond. And can I invite, please, the Archbishop to address this?
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Sue and Angela, for your question. Firstly, can I commend the work the Mothers Union are doing to raise awareness around domestic abuse. Your own conference last week, behind closed doors, is an example of that good practice. The Safeguarding Committee of the Church in Wales has already begun to address the need for a new domestic abuse guidance and training. And that is now being taken forward by the provincial safeguarding team, and a draft of the new guidance is being considered at the next committee meeting, scheduled for June. Once the guidance has been approved, a bespoke domestic abuse themed training module will be finalised for delivery within the province. But in the meantime, domestic abuse awareness is referred to in an existing safeguarding training module, while the provincial safeguarding team routinely responds to domestic abuse-related casework and the provision of support to survivors. Thank you both for the question.
Thank you, Your Grace, for recognising the work of Mothers Union in this sphere. But as regards the Church's response, I am pleased to know that the Safeguarding Committee has started to address the guidance and the training. Daily we have news items of atrocious incidents of gender-based violence and domestic abuse, more recently the atrocious incident in Australia. The Church needs to be prepared and equipped to address survivors and perpetrators of violence against women and sexual violence. From our conference last week with Restored, research shows that 1 in 4 women in our church congregations will experience violence or domestic abuse in their lifetime. But only 2 in 7 feel that the church is equipped to support them. So I welcome that guidance and training from the Safeguarding Committee has taken place. With the advice of the Bishop of Llandud, Bishop Mary, we have gone ahead and produced the Welsh version of the guide for churches to address domestic abuse. Not clergy, the church. So lay members and clergy in a church can be equipped to deal with incidents, disclosures, and signpost those individuals to the expert services through Live Fear Free Lifeline. So I wait with anticipated breath for the safeguarding advice to come out, and thank you so much.
Your Grace, do you wish to respond to that? Okay. Pedwerydd question, 4th question, a part Dr Kevin Ellis. Os gwelwch dda ar ein hesgob o ti ddewi.
Wel, yn gyntaf, fel yr esgob mwyaf ddiweddar i'r fainc, fe hoffwn ategu beth dwedodd esgob Llanelwy ynglyn â diolch am y roddion ddienw i ni wedi derbyn. Ac os mae hwn yn mynd i parhau yn y dyfodol, fi'n hoff iawn o Twix. Fe hoffwn hefyd diolch I Kevin am y cwestiwn hwn ar ran y fainc, achos rydw i'n ystyried ers y bore yma taw dysgwr yr iaith Cymraeg I chi, ac oherwydd hynny mae'r cwestiwn hwn yn urddasol iawn ac yn addas I ni, nid yn unig yma heddiw ond i'r eglwys yn gyfan gwbl ledled y dalaeth. Nid yw'r eglwys yng Nghymru yn cadw restrau ffurfiol o faint o glerygwyr sy'n gallu cymryd gwasanaethau yn y Gymraeg neu yn ddwyieithog, neu ar yr achlysurion hynny lle bu rhai dod â gweinidog arall I mewn o tu allan. Ym mhob esgobaeth, mae'r archddiaconiaid yn gwybod pwy ymhlith eu clerygwyr sy'n gallu gweinyddu neu gweithio yn Cymraeg neu yn Saesneg. Ein nod bod amser yw gwneud pob peth o fewn ein gallu I sicrhau bod pobl yn derbyn gweinidogaeth yn iaith eu calon ac yn enwedig yng nghyd-destun gwasanaethau I adnabod digwyddiadau mawr bywydau. Gan droi at ail ran y cwestiwn am gefnogaeth a chyfleoedd hyfforddi glerygwyr ddysgu Cymraeg I helpu gyda gweinidogaeth, mae cyllid grant ar gael gan gorff cynrychiolwyr. Mae swyddfeydd yr esgob yn gallu'r cyfeirio mynediad atynt a mae sawl clerig ledled y dalaeth wedi bellach wedi derbyn y fath cefnogaeth ac wedi rhoi hyder iddyn nhw I dysgu Cymraeg ac I mynd ymlaen. It's so very important that we realise that the Welsh language and bilingualism in the Church in Wales is a very important part not only of our teaching, but also the way that we reach out to people pastorally. And so I would want us to encourage everybody, and especially those who are preparing for ordination, to make every effort to learn Welsh so that at least in the homes of our respective dioceses, they can bring the comfort of the gospel to those who feel more comfortable being told the good news and taught the good news and comforted through the good news in their mother language. Felly, diolch yn fawr I chi, Kevin. I ni'n ddiffriant ddiolchgar I chi am eich cwestiwn.
Kevin Ellis, Kevin Ellis, Escobar of Bangor, elected. Diolch am ateb. Dwi wedi symud I Gymru ac dwi'n wrthymor I iaith y nefoedd a diwylliant Cymraeg. And for me, this is not a political question, but a theological one that would encourage us all to be able to communicate in Welsh and, of course, in English with those around us so that each person receives the ministry of the gospel in their mam iaith, in their mother tongue, because it really is important. And in fact, if we went to the continent, to France, we wouldn't expect anything other than somebody who was French to hear the gospel in French. So, diolch am eich ateb.
Diolch yn fawr. Question 5 for the Reverend James Henley, and the response, please, from Professor Medwyn Hughes.
Well, can I thank the Reverend James Henley for his question? It's an extremely important question, because it goes to the heart of how we resource our church and how we should acknowledge the enormous pressure our clergy are under across the province. Ministry areas have brought new challenges, of course, but I think we need to see those in the context of how best to resource our clergy to conduct mission in the modern world. HR support is one area where clergy need help. There are others, but the problem is similar in the IT provision in the estates. So there are specific generic issues here which we need to reflect on. Our traditional structure was not provisioned to support ministry areas, either through the requirements of compliance with employment law or with the needs for estates or digital outreach. I would suggest that we need to examine those needs and devise a model of delivery capable of supporting the clergy and taking some of the pressures off them with the challenges that they face now. That requires a collective will and the ability to be flexible in the way we approach service provision across the province. Now, undoubtedly, some things are better done at diocesan level, but others, such as safeguarding, are successfully done provincially. And it may be that provincial HR support to MAs, cathedrals, and even some DBFs is something that we could consider doing together. Where we can be better together, we should, if that supports the clergy. The good news is that we are starting to look at how best we might shape a service of that sort. A paper was recently approved by the RB trustees to expand the provision of HR support to the clergy. Now, it might surprise you to know that the RB has never formally offered advisory support to senior clergy, although it has been doing so in practice for several decades. That advisory provision has now been formalized, and bishops and archdeacons will soon be able to access a dedicated officer when circumstances require. In addition, there will be a rollout of training and resources to senior clergy to support them with day-to-day management practice. And I do consider that the training and resources are absolutely key to support clergy in this work. This is only a small beginning. Even in its expanded form, the HR team at the RB only numbers 4 people. However, the HR manager has been tasked with conducting a strategic review of how support services are accessed across the province. This will take in dioceses, cathedrals, and ministry areas, and it is intended that this will lead to a proposal for the provision of services that future-proofs the requirements of the Church in Wales as a whole and considers how best those could be delivered, and at the heart of that, how it supports the clergy within ministry areas. It will require extensive work and consultation, so this won't happen overnight, but the GB will be informed of its progress and will have an opportunity, it's key that they do, to engage with the ultimate proposal. Returning to the question then, I think the answer is twofold. Firstly, we are aware of the growing demand in this space and are taking steps to deliver a long-term solution capable of meeting the challenges faced in ministry areas, acknowledging the pressures that clergy are under, and elsewhere, of course, across the Church in Wales. Secondly, I welcome the suggestion that the RB's HR team should provide a HR manual to help ministry areas in the short term whilst this work is taking place. And indeed, this will be defined as an objective for the team for delivery this year. And I hope that we can disseminate a document across the province before we next meet at a governing body. Gai ddiolch I chi am y cwestiwn.
Medwyn, thank you so much for such a detailed and comprehensive response. I'm really heartened by the acknowledgement that this is a really important area of support that we need to be able to provide for ministry and mission areas. not just, as you said, in the area of HR, but also in other areas as well. So it's truly heartening to hear about the forthcoming review as well in terms of HR. And I look forward to hearing the updates on the progress of all that work. Thank you very much.
Question 6, Mr. Chris Dearden. And can I please invite the Bishop of Swansea and Brecon to the front?
Thank you very much. I did do a double take when I was asked to give a response to this question. I'm proficient in grade 1 in paper and comb, and I seem to have moved to the position where I used to enjoy the Jam and Eton Rifles to Fantasia on a theme by Thomas Tallis, but I've got no idea how I got here from Radio 1 to Classic FM and Radio 3, but here I am. The question, though, is really a structural question and about the resilience of something, a resource that we've had and held dear in the church for many years. So thank you for your question, Chris. In preparing the answer, the Secretariat made contact with a regional officer who was made redundant last year. And it's important to clarify that Wales was not singled out in its regional officer being made redundant. All regional officers across the UK and Ireland were made redundant last year. Each diocese retains its RSCM diocesan representative who serves as a liaison between the RSCM and their respective dioceses. The RSCM remains a valuable resource for church music and church musicians, and since the pandemic has increased its online and digital training provisions, and a range of training programs have been developed to address the differing church music needs and interests of school children, choirs, organists, choir trainers, worship leaders and clergy. Separately, the Archbishop of Wales Award for Church Music was inaugurated, that was back in the late 1990s, although in recent years it's not been particularly active. But the bench has agreed to breathe new life into this scheme, to acknowledge significant contributions or dedication to church music, and to acknowledge excellence. This is a decision very recently made by the Bishop, brought about in part by this question, and details are being worked out and will be communicated. Perhaps the best support we can give to music making in churches is to support it on the ground, that if you have a church choir, support it and encourage new people to join it. If you have young people in your congregations who perhaps enjoy singing or musical activities in school or locally, encourage them to make a contribution to acts of worship. Also, encourage affiliation to the RSCM. Diocesan networks often plan events and training within dioceses. I remember the second check I wrote as I came into this particular post was to the RSCM in Swansea and Brecon. Churches with limited musical and financial resources are often those who would benefit most by being affiliated and with engaging with the RSCM. Thank you, Chris.
Chris Dearden, elected Order of Laity, Bangor. Joe Cooper, the Director of Music at Bangor Cathedral, once joked that he runs the diocese's biggest youth club. It's perhaps a slightly unusual youth club because alcohol is served at its Sunday morning meetings, don't tell social services. But it is a successful one, and as Archbishop Andy will testify that at Bangor Cathedral, then most of the candidates of baptism and confirmation every Easter are wearing choir robes. Music, of course, has been part of Christian life as long as there have been Christians. Reference made in this morning's address from the Archbishop to the Last Supper. We should remember that the Gospels of Matthew and Mark record that Jesus and his disciples sang either a hymn or a psalm at the end of the Last Supper before they went on to the events of the Passion. And music is very much part of Welsh life as well. I mean, the musical education that children in this country get through institutions such as the Urdd is the envy of others around the world. It's probably also worth remembering that music is in difficult times as far as we here in Wales are concerned, not just in the church in Wales. We should remember that we, the governing body, will be going to Llandudno next spring, but the Welsh National Opera, for example, won't be going as a result of financial pressures on its budget. We should also be aware that music needs work. Worship bands and choirs need to rehearse. To recruit children to your choir, people often need to go into schools and do that outreach work. And on a very basic level, someone needs to choose the hymns which are being sung on Sunday. And in these times, I think it's more important than ever that we support anyone who makes music in praise of God. If I can thank Bishop John for your answer. It's reassuring, I think, for you to hear all of what I've just said, that you affirm the importance of music to the mission and ministry of the church in Wales. Also to hear your answer that the RSCM perhaps has realised, maybe as a result of this question, that it can't completely turn its back on us in Wales. I particularly question whether the current setup actually allows the RSCM to be effective here in Wales, because before the pandemic, their officer in Wales was running courses to train keyboard players as organists, for example, work very much going on the ground in his professional life. Long before the pandemic, the RSCM was commissioning and publishing new church music in Welsh, and we are still incredibly short of worship music which is in the Welsh language. And I'm not completely convinced yet that the RSCM is in a position to support basically our own distinctive Welsh brand of Christianity. So it's also reassuring, Bishop John, to hear you talk about ways in which the Church in Wales can help. I suppose the challenge now is to turn all of what's been said in the last few minutes into action. And I suppose I reserve the right to keep reminding the bench, the representative body, the wider church and the RSCM of the importance of music in our worship life. Perhaps to finish quoting a song lyric from your type of music, Bishop John. Every step you make, I'll be watching you. Possibly singing along.
Moving to question 7 after that short comment, quote, brief, unquote. Mr. Ian Hibble's question at number 7, and the response, please, from the Archbishop.
Ian, thank you for the question. Both the Bench and the Standing Committee have now been able to engage with the governing body motion and will give you some information relating to the course of action being taken. The self-evaluation tool commended by the motion is something that will need to have core and consistent components if it's to be any value to the church provincially. But of course, inevitably, it's going to function differently in each diocese, given our different contexts, the levels of resources, and the fact that many mission and ministry areas have been introduced at different times and with some variation in governance arrangements. The diocesan secretaries are well placed to provide direction on how this self-evaluation could be best approached, and I'm so grateful to them that they've agreed to lead our church on this piece of work. Their initial focus will be on surveying how ministry areas function, looking at opportunities and challenges, what is supporting or what is hindering growth, how are governance arrangements, how are attendance figures, finances, buildings, ministry and mission being managed and being sustained. Now that survey is in the process of being prepared even now, in consultation with, of course, diocesan senior teams, and will be sent out to ministry areas for completion during the summer. The diocesan secretaries plan to circulate the survey to members of MAX in consultation with the ministry area leaders, and this approach has been agreed with the bench. The Standing Committee's report sets out a rough timetable, but since that report was written, the diocesan secretaries have planned their work in detail, and it's likely now to take a little longer to complete than at first envisaged. The Standing Committee will be able to discuss this at its next meeting in the autumn, with a report to the governing body to follow. But may I urge all ministry areas to attend to this survey completion, as it will provide the critical detail that I think the motion invited. You ask also about the learning community. This too will allow us to confer and to learn. We don't have a forum in which the joys and the sorrows, as well as the harder-edged learning, can be shared and ultimately embedded into our common life. Providing that kind of forum is essential for a church committed to lifelong learning. A second learning community is being planned to take place in November this year, the theme of which, as I addressed earlier, will be mission and ministry areas. What does a well-resourced ministry area look like? We can, I think, expect a robust engagement with the realities of ministry, as well as a hopeful exploration of what working with Christ for the coming of the kingdom looks like. I expect the diocesan secretary's work would have been completed and digested by the time that we gather, and the themes from their work will undoubtedly assist us further. Thank you, Ian.
Thank you.
Your Grace Chair, Governing Body, Ian Hibble, Llanderfle elected. Thank you, Archbishop, for that response. That's very helpful. In your address, you outlined that in the context of ministry areas, hope is predicated on wise, trained, and careful exercise of leadership, mentored into a different way of working. My experience of ministry areas has been quite varied. I've discovered some really good practice that could and should be shared across the province. I've also experienced very poor governorship and leadership within ministry areas. And I'm glad that, that you've identified that we must have a robust approach to the evaluation and sharing of learning. I fully believe we can and do more better together. We can and should work more collegiately. We need to be courageous and take risks, but we need to be learning quickly from where we're making mistakes and championing the successes that we have. In my professional life within the public sector, policy changes are accompanied by impact assessments as well as evaluation processes. But neither of these have been integrated into the development of ministry areas, as you've identified. We're doing this afterwards. And I'm hopeful that the new process will be open, robust, and effective in evaluating any successes that we are identifying, but also where we can share learning from the positive and negative experiences from ministry areas, so that we're able to grow the kingdom of God in Wales. Thank you.
Thank you. Question 8, the Reverend Dr. Jonathan Wright. The response, please, from Professor Medwyn Hughes.
Well, can I thank Jonathan for the question? It's a key question that relates to that interrelationship between the centre and the work within the diocese. The RB currently employs 116 staff, 97 full-time equivalent posts across 4 group activities. And those are operations, led by our Chief Operating Officer, Leon Hughes; mission and strategy, led by our Director of Mission and Strategy, Dr. Graham Davis; legal, safeguarding and data protection, led by our General Counsel, Matthew Chinnery; and St. Padans Institute, led by the Principal, Professor Jeremy Duff. Our Chief Executive, Simon Lloyd, oversees all this activity. All of the staff for the RB are involved in supporting the work of the Church in Wales across the whole province. Whether the province sees that or fully understands that is another issue. Some work is in the background, liaison with our investment managers, for one example. But most of the activity is direct. Examples include support for our open and closed church buildings, our safeguarding casework, training and advice, training for licensed ministry, our new Daily with God resource, and as I just reported in another response, the need to invest even more in HR support across the province. It is hard to measure the precise effect of all this support, congregation by congregation. But the RB trustees, through their budget scrutiny processes, seek to ensure that resources that are released matched what is required across the province. Initiatives like the Green Energy Purchasing Project are only possible with a properly resourced RB Central team. Now, in the last 12 months, we have built the mission and strategy team of directors, and in doing so, have sometimes had to re-advertise posts and sometimes tweak job titles where we have not been able to appoint. So the number of appointments made is lower than the number of posts advertised. Currently, that group has, beside Graham Davis, 2 additional director posts, one of whom is a new appointment, and the other of which is a job title change for an existing employee. The issue here for me is that prudent and measured reflection of investment in the centre, and always making sure that it relates to the needs in the context of the diocese, and to get the balance right. How do we support the province, offering that infrastructure? There is much for us to do, and I and my fellow trustees will play our part by ensuring that both human and financial resources are provided to support the vital work of our mission and ministry areas. The only role of the representative body is to listen carefully to the GB, to the needs of the diocese, and then to take decisions to fund appropriately to support the mission of Christ in Wales. I have suggested to Canon Simon Lloyd that one of the key issues is communication, and I've suggested perhaps that it would be wise that the directors of these divisions would meet with each diocese and with the bishops and their senior teams on a quarterly context to share in the context of that particular diocese what is the related activity that is appropriate for the diocese. So that will also help in the context of communication to allow, I think, the province to have a better and a clearer understanding of what goes on in the context of the central infrastructure support. Diolch.
Chair, may I express my thanks to Professor Hughes for the detailed answer he's given, and I'd like to make a follow-up question. Understanding what you have just said, how is the work of these appointments so structured so that there's not duplication with the work of offices in the 6 dioceses, or is it rather that they bring their work together in the director level? And the second part of it is that 2 officers left their posts within months of joining. Is this just a process of change that the RB is going through, or is there a feeling that the posts weren't sufficiently well articulated so that both the individual and the church were clear on their role and responsibilities? Thank you.
I guess we reply in writing.
I have a suggestion that we send a fuller reply in writing, and then that will obviously be circulated as well. Thank you. So moving to question 9, please, from Moira Randall, and a response from the Bishop of Monmouth.
Thank you, Moira. I'm grateful to you for raising this question. At a local ministry mission area level, most clerics will be aware of people who used to be regular attenders at our churches, but who, because of old age or illness, or because of the need to care for a spouse or family member affected by age or illness, are now unable to attend worship or fully participate in the wider life of that mission ministry area. Some of these may have been stalwarts of a congregation, former church wardens, organists, treasurers, and the like. But whether they have held a position or role or not, they have been and they remain part of the body of Christ. Sadly, there are cases when, through absence, such people have lost touch with their church and been forgotten by their church family. Your question, Moira, is particularly pertinent, I think, at a time when we could be tempted to focus on children and young families and on attracting new members to such a degree that the older, more senior members of our congregations feel sidelined, if not forgotten. The answer to your question, what are we doing, is primarily to be found locally in individual congregations. Firstly, it is incumbent upon all of us to ensure that all members of our congregations feel valued and affirmed as part of the body of Christ and are nourished and fed, whatever their age. Secondly, visiting those who can no longer come to church for whatever reason is an important ministry that has been exercised for many years by pastoral visitors and those taking communion to homes, care and residential homes. The Church in Wales's new suite of commissioned ministries includes one for pastoral visiting, which church members can be commissioned to do after a short period of training. If any member of governing body knows of churches or ministry mission areas that have not yet embraced commissioned ministry in general, and pastoral visitors in particular, then I urge you to encourage them to do so. Pastoral visitors offer an essential ministry, providing a way of ensuring that people can continue to feel part of the church even when they can't attend public worship. It is also an important and effective way of the church keeping in touch with them. You mention Anna chaplaincy, and I'm pleased to inform you that the Church in Wales is investing in this resource via St Padarn's. A course was run for the first time last year as part of the CMD programme, and there were 38 applications for the 20 places available. It's being run again in June this year, and the 20 places will be filled. This is positive and hopeful and is something that we can build on in the future. I'm sure that members of governing body have heard your question, Moira, and what lies behind it. Affirming our older members as honoured members of the body of Christ must be something that we all strive to do. Thank you.
Moira Randall, Co-opted, Llandaff Diocese. My sincere thanks, firstly for accepting my question and for your response, Bishop Cherry. I hope that by posing that question, it will act as a catalyst for all of us to look at what we're actually doing to support those members of our communities and our churches who, like me, are moving towards the compline stages of life, where we do need the support of our church family, and certainly for many of us, or should I say the people that we're considering here, is that they need to have questions answered at this time of life. So thank you very much, and thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Our final question, number 10, from Mr. Ian Lloyd, and Your Grace.
Ian, thank you so much for your question. You rightly call our attention to the need to balance different priorities in a context where resources are limited. We do want to recognise the importance of our net zero commitment alongside the priority of growing the church, and see these not as competing but rather as complementary. Our faith calls us to care for our environment and to promote the well-being of society. When we do that well, for instance, by setting a good example of environmental practice across all of our activities, then our Christian witness gains in credibility. We earn the right to speak out on those issues, as we will be doing, for instance, as I've already spoken of earlier today on the summit on river health later this year. And I know you will know and appreciate the fact that environmental issues and issues of social justice are urgent concerns for our younger people, and that we do therefore need to be addressing the priorities which are of particular significance to them. Now, that's not to diminish in any way the challenges you identify. Resources and money are finite, and so is the time of our hard-working clergy, our staff, and our many disciples. You will, I'm sure, be heartened by some of the measures being taken to reduce our carbon footprint, which are by no means all cost items. Some may well save us money, which can in turn, of course, assist our mission of growing the church. As with all of our activities, however, we will keep this work under review. We will ensure it is as efficient as possible, both in time and resource, and is aligned as it can possibly be with the aim of growing our church. And to that end, of course, this is an open agenda. We welcome all contributions as to how that process can be made more streamlined and effective and orientated to mission. Over to you.
Ian Lloyd, elected member of the Diocese of Monmouth. Thank you so much, Your Grace, for such a robust and convincing answer to the question. I do wish to clarify that the purpose of the question was not to diminish or devalue our commitment to net zero, quite the opposite. People will not experience the fullness of life unless God's creation is protected and cared for. We all have a part to play as individuals, ministry areas, and diocese. Care for creation is indistinguishable from mission. Yet the resources required to bring about real and radical change, to make a significant reduction in our carbon footprint and to do it now, are simply not existing locally. This is a highly complex societal, political, technological and theological issue requiring very specific expertise that deserves to be prescribed, managed and financed provincially, in my view. That's where the real progress will be made. Diolch yn fawr.
Well, thank you very much. I'd like to express gratitude to all those who have asked questions, keep them coming, and to all those who have responded. And that concludes Agendum 9. I think we'll give everyone a round of applause. So, Agendum 10, Standing Committee Report on Governance and Legal Matters, which will be introduced by Mr. Tim Llewellyn. And please note that there will be various items open for debate and indeed for voting as we work through this document.
Good afternoon. During the course of my presentation of the report, I shall be proposing 3 separate motions. The first 2 of these motions are motions to make changes to the Constitution of the Church in Wales. The third and final motion is that the report be received. As with the report on the Standing Committee we have dealt with earlier today at Agendum 7, the time for debate on the whole report or questions not relating to the particular constitutional changes proposed is during debate on the final motion. But first we move to the individual recommendations. All references to pages and appendices relate to the Standing Committee's report on governance and legal matters dated April 2024. If you're looking for them in the electronic Dropbox, it may be found in the folder entitled Session 3, then choose English or Cymraeg to view the report in either language. And it would greatly assist you if you have these documents to hand. Paul, don't check them too detailed though. Each recommendation is set out, together with an explanatory note in the report, and the summary of recommendations is on page 8, and the proposals themselves are in Appendix 1 and 2 respectively. And I will briefly outline each proposed amendment so we're all clear as to what we are debating. So I'll move on to Recommendation 1, Honorary and Ecumenical Canons, Appendix 1 to the report. Recommendation 1 is a clarificatory change to the constitutional provisions for honorary and ecumenical canons of a cathedral. A number of bishops and cathedral chapters have commented that Chapter 6, Section 3, Paragraph 1,
when read alongside section 1 of the same chapter is confusing and unclear. A. Whilst lay canons are clearly permitted under section 1, it is unclear whether the proviso who are properly ordained ministers of religion in section 3, open brackets 1, close brackets, applies to honorary canons or just to ecumenical canons. As such, there is room for doubt as to whether honorary lay canons may be appointed as opposed to honorary ordained canons. Point B. In respect of ecumenical canons, the term properly ordained ministers of religion is also unclear. The Constitution does not set out whether the ministers are to be properly ordained in the eyes of the Church in Wales or are properly ordained in the eyes of their own church. It is therefore proposed that the wording shown in strike-through text in Appendix 1 be deleted from the Constitution. This will have two effects. Firstly, it will be clear beyond doubt that the bishop may appoint honorary lay canons of a cathedral. Secondly, it will enable a bishop to appoint members of other churches to the honorary position of ecumenical canon of a cathedral, whether or not that person is ordained in a church whose orders the Church in Wales recognises as valid. Sections 1 and 3 of Chapter 6 are reproduced in full in the report of your reference. Chair, I remove Recommendation 1, which is that the amendments to Chapter 6, shown in Appendix 1, be made to that chapter.
Thank you. And the Vice Chair, I gather, is going to formally second. Thank you. I open the floor to debate on this matter. I'm seeing nothing, which means that I'm allowed to move to the vote. So those in favour, those against, and those who abstain. So all those in favour, please. Thank you. Those against? I see nothing. Those abstaining? Register 1 abstention. So that is passed. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we move on then to Recommendation 2, which relates to the Archbishop's Registrar's List. The proposal is set out in full in Appendix 2 of the report. The Archbishop's Registrar's List is a list maintained at Callahan Square of clergy who have been subject to formal discipline or have resigned following a complaint made against them, or who have voluntarily relinquished their Church in Wales orders. As part of the ongoing review into the workings of the Church in Wales's disciplinary system, the Secretariat and President of the Tribunal have identified improvements they believe can be made to the holding of the list. These issues are outlined in the report. The proposals divide the list into 4 distinct sections. Again, these are set out in the report. The Standing Committee have reviewed and are supportive of the proposals. So, Chair, I move Recommendation 2 relating to the Archbishop's Registrar's List.
Vice Chair? I open the floor for debate on this matter. It's the after-lunch session. Okay, so we move to a vote. Again, simple vote altogether, for, against, and abstention. All those in favour? Diolch yn fawr. Those against? Abstentions? No, I see neither of those either. Thank you. So that is passed.
Thank you very much. So move on to Recommendation 3, and this is the approval of the report. The final matter in this item is to debate and approve the report as a whole. Chair, I move that the report of the Standing Committee on Legal and Governance Matters be approved.
Thank you very much. So again, I open the floor for debate. And if anybody else wishes to speak, it would be helpful if you came and paused near the front, near one of the lecterns.
Thank you, Chair, Governing Body. I'm Hannah Rowan, elected member for Monmouth Diocese. I was very pleased to see the Standing Committee's next steps in relation to the reform of the disciplinary processes and wanted to ask a couple of follow-up questions to that. I very much welcome the clear articulation of the standards expected in ministry. It seems very, very important. I suppose my question is whether we could expand that to also think about those standards in relation to clergy capability as well as disciplinary. And then in relation to both of those, I have a question around whether we could go a little bit further than what is currently proposed. And I'd be interested to know if Standing Committee would consider expanding the reform work to include scope for proactively holding clergy to account for meeting these standards and addressing emerging issues before they meet the threshold for a disciplinary process. Does that make sense? Great, thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Does anybody else wish to come forward? I'm not seeing anybody. Mrs. Llewellyn, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I just really want to say thank you very much for that, because I think what you've talked about there in terms of the standards, capabilities, proactively holding to account, dealing with emerging issues, I think all those are very, very important. And perhaps what I wouldn't mind doing, can I reach out to you and maybe have a discussion with you offline on this, because I think that you've obviously got a lot of stuff that you can contribute, and I think that the more that we've got, the richer the outcome will be. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much indeed for that. So therefore, I think, seeing nobody else coming forward, we will administer the vote on the report as a whole. Again, simple vote, for, against and abstention. So all those in favour? Thank you very much indeed. Is there anyone who is voting against? Is there anyone who is abstaining? I see one abstention over there. Okay, so thank you. So that report is passed, and so we have completed agenda item 10. So we're now running well ahead of ourselves. So I'm now going to... Yes?
No, let's go on.
Carry on. Okay, so I'm now passing the chair to the Bishop of St Asaph.
Thank you very much, Dean Sarah. And we now move to session 4 of the agenda items. And members who are looking at papers through Dropbox will have to move to an appropriate section 4 in order to access the papers. And we come now to the report from the representative body, and the chair of the RB, Professor Medwyn Hughes, will be introducing that report. I'm inviting him to give the report in 2 stages. First, for a general discussion of the report, after which there will be an opportunity for a debate on the report, and then following an introduction from Professor Hughes on the motion which is contained within that report and questions on the motion itself. So, Professor Hughes, thank you very much, and I take it that you're happy to proceed.
Your Grace, members of the governing body, Medwyn Hughes, ex officio member and chair of the representative body. You have in front of you a short report that outlines the activity of the representative body over the last 6 months. Now, as you'll see from the report, the RB has now elected both the chair and deputy chair for the new triennium, alongside electing the chair of the investment committee and the chair of the finance committee. Can I, with gratitude, personally thank the RB trustees for putting their faith in me and trust. And with humility, I look forward to serving the RB and the Church in Wales for the years to come. And can I thank all who have been involved over the years in facilitating the work of the representative body and also the staff here in Cardiff. Can I also congratulate Dean Nigel on his election as Deputy Chair of the RB and also now as Chair of the Finance Committee, I think the key committee of all, who will be the steward as Chancellor of the Exchequer. And also Mr. Richard Anning on his election as Chair of the Investment Committee. We have seen significant changes to the elected membership this triennium, and I look forward to working with those new trustees as the RB continues its stewardship of the Church's resources to enable the proclamation of the gospel in the most effective manner in Wales. And as we welcome new members, can I also take this opportunity to thank those that have left? Some have given significant years of service, and we are indebted to them for the loyalty and the significant work that has been undertaken. As you can see, the RB discussed the need to improve the gender balance across its membership. And indeed, this is something that needs to be worked across the Church in Wales' governance structure. And we are considering this and exploring how best to take forward the opportunities. And we are considering new ways of shadowing or mentoring, and I know that we will be coming back to this issue as we reflect in the months to come. The report includes a motion regarding the Cathedrals and Churches Commission, and I'll propose the motion at the end of my remarks. Moving on, as you will be aware from the report, the representative body continues to oversee various funding streams. And I've stressed on several occasions, the only role for the RB is to listen carefully to the needs of the diocese and then, through prudent care and reflection and discernment, to consider how best we can support your needs across the Church in Wales. The Evangelism Fund has now formally closed to new applications and has been superseded by the Church Growth Fund. The Church Growth Fund allocation group will provide continuing oversight of the Evangelism Fund projects, and membership of the allocation group includes some who were members of that original Evangelism Fund committee. Now, we are reflecting and we are on a journey. We are being ambitious and we are taking risks. Not all of the projects will work, but that's all right. We are learning from that as well. The honesty of a conversation and the honesty of reflecting and of developing new opportunities for growth is something that we really want to focus on as we move forward to invest more across the province. I, alongside other members of the RB, would like to thank those that served the Evangelism Fund for their diligent work and expertise. The Church Growth Fund has been active for just over 6 months and is welcoming applications. The Church Growth Fund allocation group reviewed the first round of Tier 1 and Tier 2 applications at its meeting on the 19th of March. 2 Tier 1 applications were approved, and 2 Tier 2 applications are still being considered. And I do hope that it will be possible for us to, through the Church in Wales website, to have the opportunity to celebrate and to note the areas of activity that have been supported. So again, for good communication, we can share the very exciting opportunities that are coming forward as we support them. You'll also note in the context of the report of the various initiatives that we have been focusing upon. Let me focus you on the investment strategy. You will note that over 14 years has now gone since we considered the current investment managers for our committee and for our work. And it is the intention of the RB and of the Investment Committee that we will review and reflect whether those are the appropriate managers as we move on. You'll also note that we have undertaken some changes, internal changes, for reporting with regard to Charity Commission reporting of serious incidents. To date, When we do report any issues of serious incidents, they would come to me as chair of the representative body. In the new structure, they will continue to come to me, but also to the vice chair and also the chair of the Audit and Risk Committee. I draw your attention also to the work that we've undertaken with regard to the consideration of risk, of the risk register, also to the work associated with St. Padans, where we've considered their prevent and duty strategy and considered a range of other issues linked to St. Padans. We have also noted within the Finance Committee and in the General Committee of RB that I'll be working with the Principal to undertake a deep dive in the context of a better understanding of the financial modelling in St. Padans in the months to come. And clearly we'll be reporting back on that over the next couple of months. These are key areas of activity which we have engaged with. I'd also note the work with the Property and Human Resources departments. I've already touched on the issue about capacity. We are very much aware of the need to be able to support you in the context of the diocese. And the appropriate reflection of staff, of infrastructure, is at the heart of our discussions. I'll stop there if there are any questions.
Thank you very much, Professor Hughes. So the floor is now open for any member of governing body to respond to the report from the chair of the representative body. If you would indicate your desire to speak in the normal manner by approaching either of the lecterns. There being universal silent approval of that report, we will now proceed to the particular motion which will be proposed by Professor Hughes and then seconded formally by Mrs. Hazel Evans.
Thank you. The representative body asks the governing body to make some minor amendments to the Cathedrals and Church Commission rules. You may ask why. These changes are merely to tidy up the membership term of the Commission, which is currently for a 5-year period. It would be convenient if this were to mirror the 3-year term and therefore match the membership term of the RB other committees. Why the membership runs on a 5-year basis is not known. And the change will have no significant, if any, impact at all in the context of the work of the Commission. And it has the full support of the chair as well. We've also used this as an opportunity to tidy up a few other elements of the rules at the same time by amending gendered language and updating terminology in the references to the Welsh Government's terminology and the revised governance arrangements for Newport Cathedral. The changes themselves have been considered and we now bring them formally to you. So I propose the motion that minor amendments to the Cathedrals and Churches Commission rules as outlined are approved.
Thank you very much, Hazel. So the floor is now open for a debate on the specific motion as proposed. Obviously caused a flurry of excitement with these radical changes. I think we can move to a vote, and I would ask all members of governing body in favour of the motion, please to show now. Thank you very much. Anyone wishing to vote against, please show. And anyone wishing to register an abstention, please show. In which case I declare that motion carried nemine contradicente. And that brings us to tea. So thank you very much, Medwyn. And would you convey from the governing body our thanks to all the members of the representative body for the work that you do on our behalf. Diolch yn fawr iawn.